Good evening. Okay, we'll begin. My name is Mark DeMoss. I'm a spokesman for Billy Graham and this organization. I want to share some information about the week ahead, at which point we'll be glad to answer your questions. I want to thank you also, or apologize for the late hour and long day. We wanted to be able to give as much information as possible tonight and let as many pieces fall in place and be confirmed so you'd have more information. So thanks for bearing with us through the day. I want to welcome you to the international headquarters of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Mr. Graham founded this ministry in 1950 and served as chairman of the board until 2014, when he became chairman emeritus, and his son Franklin succeeded him as chairman, and Franklin has served as CEO since 2000 and president since 2001. Billy Graham died at 7:46 this morning at his home in Montreat, North Carolina, about 2 hours from here. Mr. Graham's longtime physician, Dr. Lucian Rice, arrived at his home about 20 minutes later and said, quote, "He just wore out," end quote. In the 1990s, Mr. Graham had been diagnosed with Parkinson's-like symptoms. He was actually last admitted to any hospital, was Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, in November 2013. So since 2013, he has been at home, has not gone to a hospital for any reason. Born William Franklin Graham Jr., November 7, 1918, Mr. Graham was 99 years old. He is survived by his sister Jean Ford, his 5 children, Gigi, Anne, Ruth, Franklin, and Ned, and also by 19 grandchildren and many great-grandchildren. The official public website for information about the death of Billy Graham and the events in the days ahead is billygraham.org. All information such as dates and times of events will be posted regularly on that site. There's also a toll-free number for public information. That number is 877-247-2426, 877-247-2426. The official media website for information in the coming days is billygraham.org/media. This site will provide official and detailed information about, I think, every conceivable thing taking place in the days ahead. So I will say we plan to do very few beyond today, beyond what you may have already seen. We plan to do very few distributions of media information. We're not planning to send out a bunch of news releases and advisories. So your best source, if you're not actually working in this room in the days ahead, and you can ask us, your best source for updated information will be this billygraham.org/media site. You can also get updates on Twitter by following @BGEA News. We do plan to conduct a number of additional briefings in this room in the coming days, and the briefing schedule will be posted here in the Media Center and online. Let me provide some details about public and private events scheduled over the next number of days. Right now, Mr. Graham's body is at the Morris Funeral Home in Asheville, North Carolina, where it is being prepared for burial. The Morris Funeral Home has asked that media inquiries be directed to us here in Charlotte, and because of privacy regulations, they're not able to provide any information on Mr. Graham. So if you contact them, they're going to direct you back to here. We'll be glad to help you with any information related to the what's taking place at the funeral home. Tomorrow, Thursday at 3 p.m., Mr. Graham's body will be moved from the Morris Funeral Home to the Billy Graham Training Center at the Cove in Asheville, arriving approximately at 3:30. So departing the funeral home at 3, arriving at the Billy Graham Training Center at 3:30, where it will be received by some family members. This is a private movement from the funeral home to the training center and will be closed to media. On Saturday, February 24th, at 10:45 a.m., there will be a private family prayer service in Asheville at the Billy Graham Training Center. The service will be for immediate family, and there will not be media coverage opportunities during that service either. At 11 a.m. on Saturday, this Saturday the 24th, following that prayer service, there will be a ceremonial departure from the Billy Graham Training Center. A lot more information on that will be available tomorrow. I'll give you some of it now. The motorcade, processional motorcade, will leave the training center 11 a.m. on Saturday, where staff and friends and invited guests and some community leaders will be gathered to honor Mr. Graham and support the family. The motorcade will depart the Cove approximately 11:25 a.m. This is still Saturday, and complete details all the way down to the route and the turn-by-turn travel of that motorcade and its arrival here in Charlotte at the Billy Graham headquarters. Those details will be provided at great length at a briefing we'll do in this room tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 1 o'clock tomorrow, all the details regarding the motorcade taking place Saturday morning. Then Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, there will be an arrival ceremony here in front of the Billy Graham Library on this campus. This arrival will be open to full media coverage, and further details on that we'll provide you tomorrow as well. The motorcade itself, moving from Asheville to Charlotte on Saturday, will be covered by a media pool arrangement. We can give you more detail on that tomorrow, and will take about 3.5 or so hours en route. Then, upon arrival of the casket here in Charlotte, Saturday afternoon, there will be a private viewing for family members at the Billy Graham Library. This viewing also will be closed to media. There will be no public activities of any kind on Sunday, this Sunday, February 25. The following day, Monday, February 26th, Mr. Graham will lie in repose here at the Graham family home place on this property. His casket will remain closed during that period of time. The Graham family home place was built by Billy Graham's father, William Franklin Graham Sr., in 1927 on Park Road, just 4 miles southeast of this site. Billy Graham lived in it from age 9 until he left home for college. It was relocated to this site in 2006 and restored to its original condition. The entire period of lie in repose will be open to media, with some restrictions due to space limitations and traffic flow, but it will be open and quite accessible. Space inside the home place, this restored home, is very tight, so we cannot accommodate interviews in the home place, but you'll see lines queuing up and public availability during this lie in repose time. Media can also, during any time of this lie in repose, take a multi-camera pool feed from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. If that's helpful to you, take advantage of that. The lie in repose period will start Monday, February 26, 8 a.m., and run for at least 2 days, depending on demand. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. is our plan right now. 8 to 10, Monday and Tuesday. The schedule could be adjusted if necessary for any reason, but right now the plan is Monday and Tuesday, a public lie in repose here at the Billy Graham home place. There will be no public parking on site at this headquarters during this period of lie in repose. In fact, during this entire week. All public parking will be accommodated at the Operation Christmas Child Processing Center at 7100 Forest Point Boulevard, a few miles from this site, and at the Charlotte Business Valet Lot 2 at 5613 Wilkinson Boulevard. Complimentary public shuttle buses will run continually from these two lots to and from this property for this lie in repose. So let me say a few words about the funeral service. A private funeral service will be held for Mr. Graham in front of the Billy Graham Library on Friday, March 2, a week from this Friday, at 12 noon. The service will be held in a tent in the main parking lot of the Billy Graham Library, in a setup very similar to the library dedication service here in May 2007, in which former Presidents Carter, Clinton, and Bush 41 participated. Some of you were there for that. Mr. Graham's preaching ministry first gained national prominence in 1949 when he conducted a crusade in downtown Los Angeles under a tent, which was often called a canvas cathedral, at the corner of Washington and Hill Streets. The crusade was scheduled to last 3 weeks, but was extended to more than 8 weeks due to the crowds. Mr. Graham preached 65 sermons during that crusade to 350,000 people in that canvas cathedral, including 11,000 at the final service. We, his family and team members, thought it would be fitting to also conduct his funeral service under a tent as a reminder of how his public ministry was launched. Attendance at this funeral service is by invitation only. Seating will accommodate approximately 2,300 people. The public is asked not to call for tickets to this service. Those receiving invitations are being notified, in the process of being notified by email and telephone, and will know when they receive those invitations. The funeral service will be held 12 noon next Friday, regardless of weather conditions, and is expected to last approximately 90 minutes. The funeral message will be given by Franklin Graham. His brother and 3 sisters will also speak briefly. Franklin, for the past 20 or so years, has made it his practice to visit his father when Franklin was in town in North Carolina, to go visit his father on Sunday afternoons and for lunch. He last did this last Sunday, February the 18th, which is the last time Franklin would have seen his father. Incidentally, when Mr. Graham died this morning, he was not in the company of any family members. Most of this funeral program, which we'll share more about in the coming days, was developed 10 years ago or so, and is the product of Mr. Graham's lifelong associate, the late Cliff Barrows, working directly with Mr. Graham. The hymns and music that have been chosen were among Mr. Graham's favorites, and participants in the service reflect friendships or working ministry relationships with Mr. Graham over the years. It was Mr. Graham's explicit intent that his funeral service reflect and reinforce the gospel message he preached for more than 60 years. He personally approved the planning and details of this service some years ago. As soon as the availability of the other funeral service participants is confirmed, we will release complete details of that service. That information will be released here in the Media Center and posted on the billygraham.org/media website. Due to somewhat limited, but I think pretty good, pretty liberal in size, workspace under the tent for the funeral, a separate media credential will be required to cover the funeral service. So anything you're wearing now, we'll ask you to apply for another credential just for the funeral service. To apply for the funeral credential, the media credential, you can do so at billygraham.org/media, and your requests should be submitted online by 11:59 Eastern Time Monday. So got a number of days to do that, and then we'll process all of those credential requests within 24 hours and let you know of what we're able to provide. So by basically midnight on Tuesday coming up, we'll have details of the credential requests. Media who are granted credentials for the funeral can pick them up Thursday, March 1, the day before the funeral, from noon until 9:30 p.m. here in the Media Center. This will be the only way to pick up credentials to cover the funeral service, so we're asking you to come do that in person and know that you have it. Only media granted a credential for covering the funeral will be allowed on site on this property on the day of the funeral, Friday, March 2. Additionally, TV and satellite truck parking on site will be limited that day. There will be some, but it'll be limited, so we have about a week to work with you on those spaces and assigning those. So media who are granted a credential should look for more information about media parking for the funeral in the days ahead. There will be a media briefing 8:30 Friday morning before the funeral here in this room. And between now and next Friday, we'll provide a lot of information too as to when you would need to be in place in the tent with equipment especially. But we'll do a briefing Friday morning 8:30 before the funeral at noon. All right, then following the funeral, Mr. Graham will be buried beside his wife Ruth at the foot of the cross-shaped brick walkway in the prayer garden on the northeast side of the Billy Graham Library. Mrs. Graham was buried there on Sunday, June 17, 2007. She died 3 days earlier, June 14, 2007, at age 87. The site is identified on the property map on the newsroom and in photos and B-roll we have available for you here tonight. The interment service will be a private one for family members only. It is expected to be brief, and further details will be provided in subsequent briefings. We will provide a media pool coverage of the interment service Friday afternoon next week. Mr. Graham's casket was made by inmates at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola, Louisiana in 2006. Franklin Graham conducted a preaching engagement at Angola in 2005, and upon learning from the warden that inmates had been building caskets for other inmates who died in prison, he asked if they could make one for his mother and father. The caskets are made of pine plywood and lined with a mattress pad. A wooden cross is nailed to the top of the casket. A floral arrangement of white lilies in the shape of a cross will accompany the casket whenever it is stationary. Mr. Graham's 5 children chose to use the same floral arrangement that their mother and father often sent others on the occasion of a funeral. The interment service will be conducted by Dr. Donald Wilton and Dr. David Bruce. Dr. Wilton is pastor of First Baptist Church, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Mr. Graham watched television services of First Baptist Church, Spartanburg, ever since his health prevented him from attending church services. He came to view Dr. Wilton as his pastor, and the two became close friends. Dr. Wilton visited Mr. Graham almost weekly in recent years, and Mr. Graham actually became a member of First Baptist Church, Spartanburg in 2008. David Bruce has served on the staff of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association for 30 years, including 23 years as executive assistant to Mr. Graham. He also serves on the ministry's board of directors. We say a few words about some operational details, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. The document that will be posted on the newsroom, titled Important Media Times, highlights all of the key times you should be aware of for the next 10 days or so. This facility, the media center here, will serve as the central communications operation through the funeral service. We'll staff this center for extended hours and as long as there is need for its use by media. The main phone number into this media center is listed in your media materials. There will be meals provided here each day at a nominal cost in the coming days. Media parking is available on site, though public parking is not. Please present your media ID, as you did today, if you're here, for access to on-site parking. I realize in the coming days, and certain days in particular, traffic may back up in front of the entrance to this property from time to time, which will make it a little difficult for you to come and go as you might like to. I'll just tell you that local and state agencies have worked for a long time to help manage the traffic around these events, and so we just ask for your patience and to follow their instructions. The Billy Graham Library will be closed to normal operations beginning tomorrow through Sunday, March 4th, and will reopen to the public Monday, March 5. So Monday after the Friday funeral, the library will resume normal operations for the public. If or when any Graham family members wish to speak to media, we'll let you know and help facilitate those opportunities. In the meantime, feel free to submit any requests to any member of our team here in the Media Center. A number of our communication staff are here to assist you the remainder of this time and can be identified by badges like these around their necks. So ask us for anything you need. It's our intention to provide media with access to as much as possible in the days ahead, while still respecting the wishes and needs of the Graham family. If or when pool coverage is not offered and open coverage is not offered, we may release select imagery and video footage as well as details provided by a spokesperson as soon as possible after the given event, and we'll let you know about that. The Billy Graham organization will have photographers and videographers chronicling almost everything in the days ahead, which will also help explain why some cameras might be in what are otherwise restricted areas. If you see that, those would be our cameras. Thanks for understanding that. We'd like to thank, and I think they'll be here at our briefing tomorrow, law enforcement agencies and personnel who have planned and worked to manage the anticipated traffic flow and crowds in Asheville and Charlotte and around this campus. Future media briefings, again, will be held in this room and announced and posted as they're needed. For those of you that are already set up in the parking lot out here in front of the library, and have been there during the day. We're glad that was available to you today. Unfortunately, tomorrow at 8 a.m., that lot has to be empty so that construction work to erect this tent and all the things associated with this tent can begin. So equipment starts rolling in here, and they've asked that we have that lot completely clear. Until then, we're happy to accommodate you. If you're doing late work tonight or early work in the morning, we can accommodate it. We should be able to accommodate it. But at 8 o'clock, we have to pretty well have that lot cleared out. So talk to us if you have questions about that. Just two quick things I want to mention before we go to questions in the way of clearing up some, at least two erroneous reports that we're aware of so far. There were a number of media reports today that Mr. Graham had cancer. He did not have cancer. Not sure where that came from, but he did not have cancer. Secondly, there's some reports circulating that Billy Graham had a net worth of $25 million. The source for that appears to be a website called celebritynetworth.com, where you can find a lot of interesting information. It doesn't source any of it. And I will just tell you tonight, we can give you more details later, but it's not correct. We can share more about what Mr. Graham began actually giving away as far back as in 2007. And I talked to Franklin Graham an hour or so ago, and it's safe to say that that number is overstated by more than 20 times. So I'm sorry that got out there. I'm sorry to even address it on a day like this, but I'd like to shoot it down if we can. Now, we have a microphone on each side. I'll stay here. Our team will stay here as long as you want. If you need to leave, we understand that. But let us get a microphone to you, and then if you would identify yourself when you have the mic and ask your question, and we will try to answer. Go ahead. Let's go here, and Heather right here. You go second. Tim, why don't you go second? Go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you. Victor Blackwell, CNN. Mark, can you confirm invitations? The president, vice president invited former presidents, and have you received any acceptance from any of those?
Thank you, yes. So invitations either have been or are being extended to the president, the vice president, and to former presidents still living. I don't have any information on acceptance of any of those invitations. I think it's quite possible we would by tomorrow's briefing at 1 o'clock, but all I could tell you today is, yes, invitations have been extended, and as well as to some other government officials, and but I've not got, as recently as when I came downstairs here, don't have any information on any RSVPs yet. Okay, thank you. Tim.
Well, that was my question, but I'll follow up by saying, where was Franklin this morning? He was in Dallas. How did he find out about it? Where is he now? Can you give me a sense of his day?
Yes, thank you. So Franklin received a phone call from David Bruce, who I've mentioned earlier, Mr. Graham's longtime assistant, who lives in Montreat. And so David Bruce would have been the first to learn of the death. David Bruce called Franklin, who was in Dallas. Franklin turned around or prepared to head back home, and is in Asheville. Actually, I'm not certain if he's in Asheville or Boone. I'm pretty sure he will. If he's not in Asheville right this minute, he will be. I know he will be because he has something early in the morning. So Franklin went to Asheville, and I don't expect Franklin Graham to even be on this property before his father's casket arrives on Saturday. So He will be in Asheville with whatever family members go and gather over there. So I would say it's been, other than traveling from Dallas back to North Carolina, I think it's been a relatively quiet day for Franklin. I've talked to him a handful of times. He would have spoken with his brother and sisters today, or at least attempted to, but he has not had meetings or anything else. Is that good? Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. David Begnaud with CBS News. You mentioned that the family was not at the home at the time Reverend Graham passed away. Was anyone with him, and did he pass in his sleep?
Yes, thank you. So I think we can say he passed in his sleep. Nobody would have been with him other than an attendant nurse, which he has had with him at all times in recent years. He's had nurse care. So because if it had been, if he had passed later in the day, there may have been other people there, but at this hour, before 8 a.m., no other staff would have been in his home yet. So he was, a nurse was there, David Bruce would have been notified, and then Dr. Rice would have been notified. And again, had there been, had the circumstances been different, where he had had some sort of incident, or gone into a coma, or any other number of circumstances, certainly family would have made it there, but there was no notice. So it was described by the nurse and his doctor as a very peaceful passing. He was not in any pain, and would not have suffered any. And in the last several years, again, I mentioned his last hospitalization in 2013 in November with some pulmonary issues. Since then, we've described his health as that of his vital organs functioning normally, and he's had no, what you might call an incident in the past several years. He's just been, losing strength and hearing and eyesight, so we believe it was very peaceful this morning. Let's go here and then back. We'll alternate. Yes, sir.
Skip Foreman with the Associated Press. In as much as you described Reverend Graham's status and health in the closing weeks and months, what were his days like? What could he do? What did he realize? What did he know about the surroundings, the world around him, that sort of thing?
So the best information I would have on that is from Franklin, who would see him as often as possible on Sundays, and he has described it in recent times as his father being in and out of awareness. So sometimes he would respond if someone walked in the room and called his name. Sometimes he might not. Franklin and this pastor, Dr. Wilton, have described settings where they would talk to him. He may not respond for a period of time, and then he might respond. So his day, he's, I believe, was getting up each day and was put in a special chair. It was not a wheelchair, but it was a chair with wheels, where he could be taken to different rooms in the house or outside on a nice day. But he was not, in recent times, certainly was not, for example, taking phone calls and entertaining guests other than family members. So it's been quite quiet in recent months and in the last couple of years, really. Yes, sir.
Adam Reese, NBC News. Can you tell us his involvement with Samaritan's Purse? I know Franklin's very involved. What was his involvement?
You're talking about Billy Graham's involved. So his involvement in Samaritan's Purse, I would say he has not been involved in Samaritan's Purse for a long time, and in earlier years, his involvement would have consisted of an occasional joint appearance with Franklin, maybe at a disaster relief zone or a distribution of food, but those occasions were years ago. So he really was not involved in Samaritan's Purse. Yes.
Hey, Savannah with NBC Charlotte. There has been, and I'm sure will continue to be, an influx of people from the public wanting to pay their respects in different ways, whether it be with visits here, flowers, monetary donations. What's the best way for the public to pay their respects at this time?
So the very best way, well, certainly for anybody within a driving distance of Charlotte, would be to do that on Monday or Tuesday next week during this lie and repose period. There are other opportunities online and elsewhere to sign a guest book, to post a comment of encouragement, and I expect some people may create their own ways to do something physically, in front of this property or in Charlotte. But I think the best way is these two, possibly more days of public lie and repose, especially since the funeral service is limited in space and by invitation. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ken Smith with WRAL. We've talked to so many people today who talked about how many lives he's touched over the years, millions. Can you briefly talk about Reverend Graham's legacy?
Well, that's hard to do. I think the simplest way to do it is he preached one message for more than 60 years, a very simple message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I think I could share one anecdote, perhaps, related to his legacy. This was back in, he conducted his last public preaching crusade in 2007 in New York. And he was asked by an interviewer, when it's time to meet your maker, I want to know, if there's one thing, what do you want everyone to remember about you? What is the most important thing to you? So this answer would be Billy Graham's answer to your question. He said this, that I was faithful to the message that he gave and faithful to the calling that he gave me to go into the world and preach the gospel. That's how I'd like to be remembered. Thank you. Anybody else? Right here, third row.
Was it heart failure? Heart failure, the cause of death, and I know it apparently was in his sleep. Were there any final words that he had said that y'all are aware of?
No. So no to your second part. No final words that anybody's aware of. He just did not wake up this morning, and so I think I'll stick with what his doctor said. That he just wore out, and not try to give it a medical, any medical description, which I don't have. Yes, the doctor's name, Lucian, L-U-C-I-A-N, Dr. Lucian Rice. He's been Mr. Graham's longtime personal physician over in Asheville. Yes, sir.
Von Hilliard with NBC. Just wanted to confirm with you that Reverend had not spoken with President Trump since President Trump took office in 2017, and that the only time that they had met was a 2013 birthday party for the Reverend, I believe his 95th, when Melania and the President met him. Is that the case?
Yes, both of those are correct. Billy Graham has not spoken with the president since his election, and you're correct also. The last time they spoke was at Billy Graham's 95th birthday party, which was in at the Biltmore in Asheville, North Carolina. So. I'm sorry, Grove Park Inn, thank you. Grove Park Inn in Asheville, 95th birthday party. He met then just Donald Trump, yes, and Melania. Anything else? Okay, appreciate your patience. Thank you for being here. We'll do it again at 1 o'clock tomorrow with full details on the motorcade, so we can get that word out, and we'll be around as long as you need this evening. Thank you.